The second half of the FIDE Candidates tournament in Toronto has just begun. It is round 8 and we are going to look in this video at the key game between two top American players, Hikaru Nakamura and Fabiano Caruana, who are not in the lead. That is Jan Nepomniachtchi. He's on 4.5 out of 7. Fabiano is on 4 out of 7 and half point behind Fabiano is Hikaru. Hikaru tried really hard in the previous round to beat Jan Nepomniachtchi, but he erred at the critical moment. He had a very promising position, great preparation. Let's see what he is coming up with in this game. It's a key game. Both players, they really want to win and see if they can catch up with Jan Nepomniachtchi. I'm asking you one favor, and it's for a very special reason. It is my birthday, so my favorite birthday gift is you to become a subscriber of this channel, the Robert Ris Chess channel on YouTube. Guys, you know what to give me for my birthday. Thanks for doing that. I'm going to show you the game now. Here we go. Hikaru plays 1e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Ruy Lopez, not a big surprise, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. Here, interesting moment, because all these top players, they're playing a lot of different systems. And if you do castle, there is this possibility to take on e4. It's the open variation of the Ruy Lopez, which has been played a lot by Fabiano in the past as well. But you have to prepare for so many different kind of scenarios that you try to reduce the amount of lines you need to check before the game. And I think Hikaru is very good at choosing his lines. Also in their first encounter in round 1, he managed to surprise Fabiano with a nice sideline, and even though he got the worst position, he kind of nicely hold to a draw later on. Anyway, for this occasion, he played the move d3. So you're avoiding this open variation. Of course, there are also other drawbacks, so you cannot play c3, d4 in one go, but we get a game. And I think that is exactly what Hikaru is looking for. He doesn't want a theoretical battle against one of the leading top theoreticians in the world. Bishop c5, this is pretty much in the spirit of the Archangels variation, of which Fabiano is one of the leading experts as well. White's gonna castle, and in previous games, if I'm not mistaken, I think Fabiano mainly played here the move b5, which would transpose to the d3 systems of this opening. But here he goes for the move d6. He doesn't want to play b5 yet. He has a different idea in mind, so that after the move c3, castling kingside, rook e1. The players are still following a game, an earlier game of Hikaru Nakamura. He played against Magnus Carlsen in an online event during pandemic. In that game, Magnus played the classical move bishop a7, dropping back with the bishop so that it never will come under threat. Makes a lot of sense, but Fabiano played here the move knight e7. Whenever you try to reroute your knight to g6, which is the main plan of this move, you always got to think about this strike in the center with the move d4, attacking the bishop. And well, if you take on d4, then you're surrendering the center. That's not what you want to do. But I guess that Fabiano's preparation was based on the move bishop a7. And if you do take on e5 with the intention of winning the pawn there, black instead will play first the move knight to g4, attacking the pawn on f2, as well as the pawn on e5. So black will regain the pawn with a good position. So therefore d4 is not a big problem here yet. Knight bd2 was played instead. Black continues with the plan. Knight g6, knight f1. And well, also white's getting its knight around to g3 as we can expect. But now, interesting moment in the game. I think it's still pretty much the most common continuation in such positions is to drop back with a move like bishop a7. But Fabiano goes for d5. He's a very concrete player. He likes these kind of sharp lines. So I guess this was still part of his plan. Now after pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, he is sacrificing the pawn on e5. But if you do take on e5, well, because after knight takes e5, apart from taking on e5, there's also this move d4, regaining the piece with a very pleasant position for white. However, a better continuation is to take on f2 first, so that the bishop will not be shut down. You're forcing white to capture, and then knight takes e5 with a lot of tactical ideas with the knight coming in. And note that the knight on e5 can't really be taken because of queen f6 with a double attack on the king and the rook. So anyway, now you understand the pawn on e5. It's not really poisoned, but it's also not advantageous to white to capture it. So white played here to move bishop to b3. Bishop is better placed here, adding some pressure on that knight. Black supports it with the move c6, so later on the queen will be free to move. The pawn on e5 still really can't be taken because of the same reasons as on the previous move. And here white instead played the move d4. Interesting move. Pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. Symmetrical position. And it's not a boring game, guys. There are still all the pieces on the board. And usually the side with the more active pieces can count on an edge in these sort of structures. Black drops back here with the knight to f6. Understandable, but it also does open the diagonal for the bishop on b3, which is a great piece. And I guess one of the ideas of black's last move is that if you play bishop e3, probably the knight will come into g4 and you're trying to eliminate that bishop. So white first goes for the move h3, guarding the g4 square. But it does give black the chance to trade off the bishop for the knight and give white an isolated queen's pawn. And we know that when more pieces are coming off the board, this will turn into a weakness later on. But for now, with many pieces on the board, it also does give white a pleasant space advantage and possibilities to build up some attacking play. Let's see how it works out in this game. Black comes back with a knight to the blockading square. Very thematical play. Another point is that after bishop goes back to c2, now the bishop can be developed to e6. So black is pretty solid. All these pieces are well guarded by a black pawn. Knight goes to g3, and I think this is an interesting moment, because what should you do in such a case? I'm not sure what the exact best move is. I think there are different ways of approaching this position, but I would say moving the queen somewhere, either to h4 or maybe to b6 to add some pressure to the pawn on d4, with the idea to connect your rooks and try to centralize them. And once your rook is on e8, you may move your bishop away from e6, try to initiate the exchange of pieces. I think that is a classical way of trying to play with black. And okay, maybe white is a bit better here. He has the bishop pair, but on the other hand, there's also a potential weakness on d4. So I don't think there's much to complain here for black. Anyway, black played here the move knight d to f4. What's this knight going to do here? Probably the queen would like to come into the game, adding pressure against the pawn on d4. But white played here the move rook e4, attacking the knight on f4 with the second piece, and the knight goes back. So basically it's an indirect draw offer. If white goes back to e1, then we may see a repetition of moves. But that's not what happened in the game. Apparently, Hikaru felt very comfortable playing this position. He played the move a3. I think it's a sensible move to guard his b4 square, because usually you want to get your queen to d3 at some point, setting up a battery together with your bishop. Black goes rook e8. White here, instead of playing queen d3, first play the move bishop d2. There are no immediate attacking chances, but at some point we will get to see. The reason you play here bishop d2 is that you very soon would like to get your rook into the game. Knight f6, attacking the rook on e4. If the rook goes back to e1, the pawn on d4 is hanging now. Is because of the bishop on d2, you're no longer defending the pawn on d4. But rather than moving the rook away, white brings the bishop into the game to pin that knight on f6. It cannot take the rook on e4, obviously. Black goes for h6, questioning the bishop. Bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. Remarkable moment as black is restoring the material balance, getting back this bishop pair. Material's even. There's this isolated pawn. You would expect white to be maybe a bit worse here, but things are not that simple. The queen goes to d2, and very soon the rook will come to e1 with pressure along the e file. The bishop may eventually get pinned on this e file, even though okay, the rook is still defending the other rook. Very complicated position. I was analyzing this position a bit, and I was thinking bishop d5 is a very logical move. But the reason it was not played is because of rook g4. With enormous pressure against that knight on g6. Now the bishop was leaving the e6 square. The rook is very nicely placed there. And if you go back with, once again, a potential draw offer, there is knight h5 attacking the queen. One sample line. If you do go queen d8, rook to g3, and white gets exactly what it wants with a lot of pressure against the two pawns and the knight. Looks like white is having a lot of fun here. Anyway, the bishop stays therefore on e6, preventing the white rook from leaving the e-file, reaching the g4 square. Black instead went here for the move queen g5, offering the exchange of queens. We know that white is looking for attacking chances, is not really considering the exchange of queens here. Play the move rook to e3. There were other options as well, just to move the queen somewhere. But white also says, my rook is okay here. Still, I think black has to try to get its remaining piece into the game. The rook on a8 isn't doing anything. So I think after rook a8, it's a very complex position still. But Fabiano goes for knight f4. But I think he overlooked white's next move. Because now this is a surprising move. And this is spot on. h4, attacking the queen. And the pawn can be taken, of course. But if you do so, the rook will return to e4 with a huge threat on this knight. Knight can't go away, because then the queen will be hanging. If you defend it with g5, there is rook ae1, and there are a lot of problems, because there's a pin on both the e-file as well as the fourth rank. Maybe knight f5 is a nice tactical shot that the knight jumps into the game, because the rook on e8 will be unprotected. So this is something which offers white tremendous play for just one pawn. Therefore, black, rather than capturing the pawn on h4, played here the move queen d5, threatening just checkmate in one. But white goes back with the rook to e4, setting up a threat against the knight on f4, and of course solving the mating threat. The mating threat is gone. Critical moment where to go with the knight. And Fabiano played a very logical move. He went back with that knight to g6. But I have to admit that there is apparently one bizarre idea, and I guess that it may have been considered by both players. There's this tactical strike here with knight takes g2 all of a sudden. If you do take that knight, there is f5 and the rook on e4 is pinned. So black is going to win material. However, the big question is that if you don't take that knight on g2, if that knight is ever going to return. So for instance, white could just move the queen away, and there are a lot of insane variations. For instance, if you play something like f5, trying to get back in touch with the queen and the knight, whereas rook takes e6. And after rook takes e6, bishop to b3, white is winning material, because also the knight on g2 will eventually be hanging. I mean, there are other lines, very complicated stuff, but it's also a matter of taste, and players are getting lower on time. So it's understandable that black doesn't go for that line with knight takes g2. Instead, knight g6, as I said. And here, before anything else, rook ae1. This is how you play attacking chess, making sure that before you're trying to strike, all your pieces are optimally placed. That is a very good move. And look, white is thinking about this idea to kick that knight away from g6 to an inferior square. And therefore black said, okay, I'm going back with my knight to f8 anyway. The knight is safe. Even though it's very passive, it does control the h7 square, so there are no immediate mating threats, but white is going to increase the pressure here with this move, rook to e5. Queen goes back to d8 to attack the pawn. And how to deal with it? Well, Naka played a very logical move, h5, so depriving the knight from ever getting back to g6. But apparently there is one beautiful line I want to show you. It is queen to f4, bringing the queen into a better position, protecting the pawn. And I'm thinking that if you want to play queen f4, why you don't play it? Well, I was guessing that knight d7 could be an idea, but very good move. Just an example of how white's pieces are looking for opportunities to hit the black king. There is knight h5 with more ideas to get closer to that pawn on g7. If you take the rook, it's queen takes e5, threatening mate on g7. If you block with f6, queen g3, renewing the mating threat. And well, if you play queen d7 to keep everything defended, well, your pawn on f6 is gone and you will win the queen. g7 cannot capture on f6. And if you play queen e7, well, the problem is that the rook is no longer defending e6. So I'm not saying this is a forcing line, but I think it's a very nice illustration of white's attacking potential. Anyway, let's get back to the game as h5 was played. And here, well, maybe black is worse, but he should definitely put up some more resistance than what Fabi did in the game. If you do play knight d7, for instance, probably the queen will come to d3, and this is getting very dangerous. You don't want to see a queen coming in. If you take the rook on e5, queen h7, king f8, rook takes e5, there are also all sorts of attacking ideas here, with knight f5 coming in, taking away the escape square from the king, queen h8. I think this is just really bad for black, but therefore difficult to suggest what black should do. You never really want to move your f-pawn. It will weaken the bishop and potential problems on this diagonal as well. So Fabi played here bishop d7. So finally he's going to initiate the exchange of rooks, but his pieces are still very badly placed, very passively placed, I should say, with the rook not being able to recapture on e8. So after rook takes rook, bishop takes back, but you don't want to stay with your piece on the back rank. You know, white is going to seize the initiative here with knight f5. That is a great idea, a great spot for the knight with various tactical ideas. You're looking in many different directions where it really goes to, on the next move, it depends on black's reply. But for instance, if you do take on d7, if you play bishop d7, I mean, there is knight takes h6. This is the crucial idea. G takes h6, queen takes h6, and even though you're not threatening checkmate yet, because the knight covers the h7 square, very soon a rook will come over. Maybe rook e3, g3. Sometimes the rook can come to the 4th rank or to the 5th rank. Black is unable to initiate the exchange of more pieces. You cannot even challenge the queen on h6. So black is completely busted. Therefore, Fabi played the move queen f6. He wanted to bring the queen back into play, guarding the h6 pawn. But now, look at this, and this is maybe the big turnaround in the game, as we are focusing on the king side. But here the queen comes to b4 to hit that pawn on b7. And well, Fabi said, okay, I'm going to defend my pawn just to put it on b5. But look at this, guys. Knight to e7 check. The queen does support. Also, the rook supports the knight. But look at this. The king got to go away to h8. And you're thinking maybe, well, there's not a good discovered attack. But Fabi definitely overlooked this one. Knight d5. And it's resignation time. White wins this game because you're attacking the queen. And after c takes knight, there is queen takes f8 with checkmate. The king can't go anywhere. This is brutal. Like 10 moves ago, we were thinking maybe it's a bit better. Maybe black is consolidating its position, but you would never have expected white to win so fast. This move, queen b4, it did create a lot of problems. Knight e7 is a threat. The pawn on b7 is hanging. Maybe black should still have tried getting the bishop back into play. But there's queen takes b7. You're winning a pawn at least. So white is much better and has very good chances to convert anyway. But this is very important moment in the tournament, because with his victory, Hikaru Nakamura leapfrogs Fabiano Caruana. He's half a point ahead of him. But okay, there are other guys still playing here. Who knows what's gonna happen? Probably I'll cover 1 or 2 games more from this round 8. But you know at least that Hikaru just managed to win his very important white game against world's number 2. Thanks for watching this video. And if you do like it, please give me my birthday, guys. Subscribe to the channel, give it a like, share it among your friends, because I'm going to cover also the last 6 rounds of this event. The tension is growing. Who is going to challenge world champion Ding Liren later in the year? We will see it here on this channel. Bye bye.